today there's a lot of people who are very enamored of the Gnostic Gospels, Gospel of Thomas, for example. And what's the manuscript evidence like for something like the Gospel of Thomas in comparison with the four Gospels or any other book of the New Testament?
It's pretty bad, really. Gospel of Thomas, we have one book in Coptic that was discovered when the Nag Hammadi finds were discovered in 1945, and we have three earlier fragments in Greek that were known long before Nag Hammadi. We just didn't know what they were from. And then when the Nag Hammadi manuscripts were discovered, these Greek manuscripts are also from the Gospel of Thomas. And what's remarkable is they represent about 20% of the Gospel of Thomas, the Greek fragments do. But there's several significant differences between the Greek manuscripts and the Coptic manuscript. And what that tells us is that here's a document that was probably not considered to be sacred when it was copied. It was modified significantly to fit in more into Gnostic ideology. I don't think the Gospel of Thomas was originally a Gnostic document, but later it was used by the Gnostics, and they had to modify it significantly to make it kind of fit into that viewpoint a little bit more.
So the Gospel of Thomas was originally written in Greek. We have three partial fragments of it in Greek, and then we've got this Coptic translation from several centuries later, and only one copy of that, and that's it. Is that about right?
Yeah, and except that I'd say that the Coptic manuscript is not several centuries, but it's probably just a couple centuries later.
Okay.
And
now,
so
is this pretty typical for the Gnostic writings?
No, I think it's pretty decent for the Gnostic writings to have that many copies.
It's one of our better attested
that's right.
Gnostic writings.
Now, we knew about the Gospel of Thomas from the patristic writers. They talked about it extensively, and they quoted it and misquoted it. But then when we found this Gospel, then that was a very important discovery for us to really think through what the Gospel of Thomas said and why it was not particularly well received in the church. The Gospel of Judas was virtually unheard of until this discovery was made, and we have one copy of that, as you know. And then you've got these others, the Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Mary. There's all sorts of Gnostic Gospels where we typically have one copy. Now, some might want to argue that the reason we only have one copy of that is because the Orthodox Christians did such a great job in destroying these manuscripts. The problem with that argument is we have very few copies of the early apostolic fathers who were considered to be Orthodox. For example, the Didache is considered an apostolic patristic writing. That is a second century, early second century, maybe even a first century Christian document. And there's one complete copy of that in existence, and that's in Jerusalem. It's 11th century. So you start making those comparisons. You say, well, gee, what do we base our views or our text of Ignatius on? We've got just a handful of manuscripts of Ignatius, another patristic writer. Most of these Orthodox writers have very few copies as well. To be sure, they have a little bit more, typically, than the Gnostic writings, but not anything compared to the New Testament. The New Testament just blows away all of the competition in terms of the number of copies and the proximity of the dates of those copies to the original.